University of Zurich. I also happen to be the chairman of the Blockchain Center of our university, and together with me is Sheng-Nan Li, who, as the title indicates, she's a postdoc in my team since this year. And we're going to talk about two things related to the kind of research that we are doing on Cardano and the integration between these two aspects that may seem unrelated at the beginning. On the one side is looking at, I say a little bit of the kind of research that we perform in my team. We are doing a lot of research on blockchain analytics, so we do on-chain data and in some cases off-chain data analysis in order to understand economic processes in blockchains, specifically the role that incentives play. And actually the main topic of the presentation today is going to look into the staking dynamics in Cardano and how they are affected, for example, by the protocol parameters that are affected to them, and how blockchains. Thank you very much. I say that I knew all the time about this, and I didn't. And how a blockchain analytics approach can help in that direction. I'm professor in Switzerland. In blockchain, Switzerland is perhaps one of the most interesting places to do research in this space, not simply because Cardano Foundation is there when we are talking about research in this space, but specifically because there is a very large ecosystem. There are more than 1,000 startups and foundations, associations, etc. in this space in Switzerland, and it is an ecosystem that has been continuously growing since 2014 when Ethereum Foundation first established there. The regulatory aspects are very well set, and therefore there is a lot of interest, not only from the industry side, but also in academia. In 2019, we established the Blockchain Center of the University of Zurich, that is the largest academic initiative in this space in Switzerland. We are now, and one thing that is important is that our university has 7 faculties. It's the largest university in the country, 28,000 students that cover all the areas of knowledge. And exactly because of this logic is also reflected in the structure of the Blockchain Center. We are a blockchain center that for which interdisciplinarity is key in the kind of approach that we take in blockchain. The University of Zurich has the largest law faculty. I am professor in the Faculty of Business, Economics and Informatics, and this is why, and we have a lot of professors there, and that's why this interdisciplinary approach that covers all the area of knowledge is so important for us. And as I always like to say, we do not consider that it is possible to understand blockchains just looking at them as at these topics as separated silos. That's why we look at them from a completely systemic point of view. And specifically in my team, we do a lot of research based on data analysis of the data that is contained inside of all these public ledgers. Now we are 24 faculty members that are members of the Blockchain Center. We have more than 50 researchers at the university, covering really every single area of knowledge that is relevant to the space. And we have as a mandate, because we are a competence center at the university, we have a mandate from the university board that is to coordinate research, education, and collaborations with third parties like industry. I think that the industry is doing a lot of very interesting things in terms of development, of ideation processes, of creating new environments for these new ecosystems to grow. We're really happy to partner with them. But we are still a university, and the last thing that I wanted to say in this introduction is that for us it is very important to remain, we are trustful to our own principles. That is, remain unbiased, okay? We always want to deliver a critical and unbiased understanding of the space. That's why we enjoy very much our collaborations with industry, but we always want to remain neutral in the kind of statements that we pose with respect to specific actors. Okay, the topics for today, we are going to cover 3 things. I'm going to be only talking about the first part in this presentation about why it is so important to do a proper analysis based on the different identities that people have inside a blockchain like Cardano. This should always be the first methodological step to try to draw any kind of conclusion of what happens afterwards. Later, we will get into the actual topic of the presentation, that is looking at this is an SPO session trying to look into the trade-offs that exist between when we conceive the way in which rewards are going to be distributed in a delegated proof-of-stake-based systems, and we will see a very interesting trade-off that exists between the inclusiveness that a platform has in terms of granting rewards to more people inside of an era or an epoch, depending on which we are talking about, and the level of decentralization that this blockchain is able to achieve. And then as a secondary step, at the final step, in this area of protocol design and reward distribution, we will inspect some of the effects of different parameters updates that has specifically in the case of Cardano. Why do we want to do that? Because we have a very interesting collaboration, very exciting collaboration with Cardano, and we want to understand and to help the different stakeholders in the Cardano ecosystem. And in this case, when we are thinking of delegation, we are talking about treasury, we are talking about delegators, we are talking about SPOs that have a very sophisticated decision-making process, or perhaps not always it is the case. We want to understand better these kind of behaviors to enhance the way in which the protocol functions in the long run. And in order to do that, what we want to do is, starting from now, having a long-term inspection and understanding on the way the protocols of Cardano, the values of the protocol, the parameters of the protocol of Cardano work, and which is the effect that changes may have in the long run. Let us go to the first part of the presentation that is going to be, as I said, related to reconstructing identities in Cardano and some quirks that appear because Cardano is, as you all know, is UTXO based. And this comes with a very interesting thing and additional things that happen from the point of view of trying to reconstruct identities, or at least trying to understand the different addresses that are controlled by the same users, the different addresses are controlled by the same user or are part of the same wallet in the system. And it is very interesting because when we started to have blockchains in 2009 with Bitcoin and so on, one of the main reasons on why people wanted to have blockchains was to allow their identities to be as hidden as possible. Okay, it was privacy was very important for the first communities that were developing blockchain-based systems. But at the end of the day, by leaving traces of activity in a ledger like UTXO is, actually the traces of user activity leave a lot of very important information in order to try to reconstruct the different aliases that they are using. And this is on the one side, therefore it is possible to reconstruct identities. And on the other side, one thing that we have to very wary about is that when we are trying to draw conclusions simply based on addresses and how much an address has in terms of balance, which is activity of an address, etc., specifically in a blockchain that is UTXO based, for the reasons that I will show in a second, the results are very off from the reality, okay? And this is something that has to be always taken into account, that is done very much in blockchains like Bitcoin. It is not done so much in Cardano, and this is something that we are trying to work out to improve as part of our research. One thing that happens in Cardano addresses is that a Cardano address has multiple parts, okay? And of course, the most important part of a Cardano address, or the one that is used more regularly, is the payment part of the address. That this is what allows people to process and to sign the UTXOs that has still not been spent, for example. However, there is a secondary part that is also part of the same Cardano, of the address structure, that is the delegation part. That is exactly the part that owns the rights on the funds that are delegated in a staking pool as part of the consensus process, to produce new blocks. Okay, so this is a very generic picture that tries to show how a block in a blockchain looks like in an UTXO-based blockchain. You have here, you know that each transaction, that is what you are showing here in this column, Each transaction has its own ID. And transactions have two parts, an input part and an output part. The input part is just the expenditure of some previous transactions and specific outputs of the previous transaction have not been spent so far. This is and you have a sequence of these now spent outputs, and the addition of them are going to a set of what is becoming now a new set of unspent transaction outputs. So if I wanted to use just the addresses to try to understand the economic flows inside of this economy, and this is the only set of transactions that I have in this blockchain so far, or these are the only ones that I am analyzing here, what you see is that you have all this set of addresses, 48 and 49, are sending some assets to address 21. This is why you have the arrows flowing there. And all the others are creating all this flow of assets that is very complicated. There are a set of heuristics that having first, or there was a set of heuristics that were known to work in Bitcoin simply because of the way in which you have to sign transactions. And they are of the following way. The first heuristic that that is used is the fact that whenever you have a transaction with multiple inputs and the transaction with multiple inputs have different addresses, each one of them, provided the transaction was signed at the same time, in most of the cases, remember that user behavior in general aggregates over a lot of regular usage, okay? Even if in some cases there may be transactions that are signed separately, this is not what happens in most of the cases. So what happens is that if in the input part of the transaction we have two different addresses, like 41 and 48 and 49, the most likely thing is that 48 and 49 belong to the same user because they are signing together the transaction. The person had access to the private keys concurrently. And this works for all the transactions inside of this block, which means that we have all these sets of links in this so-called correspondence graph that allows us to say these addresses are belonging to the same user. Then the other thing that is specific and very interesting to Cardano is the fact that even if you have multiple payment addresses, all of them always have the same delegation part. And provided this, then if you have the set of addresses that have the same delegation part, you know also that all these addresses belong once again to the same wallet. And once again, building on the previous transaction, we can create new links between applying this heuristic. We can create new links between nodes that we are now proving that belong to the same user, like in this case 33 and 88, because they have the same delegation part. And one very funny thing that happens now is the following. I have created this network of correspondences between different addresses. If you know a little bit about graph theory, what you will immediately identify is that there is a property of transitivity. If 33 and 88 belong to the same user, and 88 and 87 belong to the same user, 33 and 87 are the same. Which means that the process of trying to identify addresses is equivalent in this case to just identifying connected components here. And this is, from a mathematical point of view, from a graph theory point of view, something that is incredibly efficient and you can do very fast and allows you to build from this representation, this correspondence graph, a different representation in which all the different entities are represented and coalesced in different colors in our representation. And this is what eventually allows us to replace all this very large scale structure of different addresses into a much more simplified picture of the same block and understand better all the economic flow that you have in the system, like I am showing here in this case. Okay, you are completely reducing the dimensionality of the problem by this kind of approach. And one thing that is interesting for us to remember is that when you start to look at this in Cardano, you end up having distributions of, I will call an entity the set of addresses that I identify as belonging to the same user. What is very interesting to see is that the set of entities is very heterogeneous. There are many, many entities that control very few addresses. There are some entities that control millions of addresses, okay? They say, okay, perhaps it is fine, it is normal. One thing that I want to point out here is that the two scales in the x and y axis are logarithmic. And when you look into this, it means that this is a kind of mathematical process that leads to the creation of very large entities. It's a process that is very, very heterogeneous. It's not a trivial process that could lead other kind of distributions like a normal distribution, okay? And this is because there is an economic process in the back, because the users that have many more entities are also controlling a much larger wealth than the others, okay? The two things are intertwined with each other. And this is why, as well, the development of these methodologies has to be done so carefully and not in the hidden, like, for example, private companies that are doing clustering techniques for addresses in blockchains do. The problem that you have is that this distribution is skewed, and you have some entities that control a lot of addresses. So if you have false positives, all the errors accumulate in the tail of the distribution, created a completely distorted picture. That's why the quality of the methods that are developed is so important. This is the kind of research that we are performing that Mostafa is developing now with us. When you look into this, it also means that, of course, you have a rate of creation of new accounts in Cardano, the new addresses that appear inside of the blockchain. But when you look at them, you see that actually the picture in terms of how many entities are entering into the system every day is completely different. Instead of tens of thousands, you have basically 1,000 new users basically being detected inside of the system. The other thing that I said is that when you look at economic processes and you look into things like inequality, depending on how you do it, even if you do it at the level of the at the level of addresses or at the level of entities, the picture changes considerably. With this, the only thing that I wanted to say, and with this I also close my part, is that we have to remember that actually these techniques are fundamental in order to have a better picture of the actual economic functioning of a blockchain like Cardano, if you want to later get insights on the economic function of this. Now Sheng-Nan will take over and we'll talk about the delegation part. Thank you.
Line system is already staked. Comparing with the Ethereum system, there are only around the 20% of the Ethereum staked. So it means it could bring us a question: how much of the ADA you need to receive the reward as a staking pool? So here we do some analysis from the very beginning until the current epoch. So you can find, if you want to receive the reward in an epoch, so at least you should have more than 50K ADA of the total stake you could receive. And then, so it also means, so because as the staking pool, you couldn't always expect you receive the reward once. So how much you should have to ensure you can always be successful in the system. So here we do some analysis about how much of the staking pool could continually be success to more than 3 or 4 or 5 epochs. So you can see from here you can see it's almost the same set of validator could always be success, continually be the success. And to be the part of member in this set of active successful staking pool, you should own some amount of ADA. So it means you should have the threshold of the 3 million ADA to be always successfully. And here you can find, as Claudio already introduced, the entity we identified here is most of you know that in the current system, we have more than 3,000 staking pool in the system. But if we further look from each stake pool by the entity, because before Claudio introduced that each entity could control the multiply address. But here, if you look how many staking pool by each entity, so you will see here is a slightly decreased here. It means the kind of trade like the pool will be owned by, some pool will be owned by a limited part of the users in the system. And then we do some analysis of the reward distribution, use the Gini index, which measures whether the reward is distributed equally among the staking pool or not. So you see, maybe at least is a special point is before the Cardano decreased the saturation parameter in the protocol. So you can find, because of this, changing the Gini index has a slightly decreased. So it means the reward distribute more equally in the system among the different staking pool here. But if with the time goes by, more and more staking pool enter the system. Even if you look, the yellow line here is the total stake in the system. This value is a bit stable in the system, but the number of staking pool is grows continually. So it means if you follow this trend, the Gini index is almost increased back to the previous situation. So you can find with the staking pool increase, it's a kind of not very equally of the reward distribution. So we identified this is a kind of trade-off in the proof of stake system between the inclusion and the inequality of the reward distribution. So it means, looks like the more staking pool or the users involved in the staking process, it will cause the system be actually a bit inequality of the reward distribution. And then I move to the final part. Is here we do some simulation of the parameter update in the protocols. Maybe you already a bit familiar with how the staking pool built in the Cardano system, because each stake pool consists of three important components. The first is the pool will have the one pool operator who will be later propose the block. And each pool could be owned by one or multiple staking pool owners. They should give some, like the deposit some amount of ADA in the system. And then if you don't want to be the pool operator, you can also be the delegator. You just delegate your ADA to some staking pool operators here. So we call it delegators. And each pool could have multiple delegators there. And then at the end, the amount of stake, including the pledge stake and the delegate stake, will be at the end determine the pool rewards. Because of the Cardano protocol, there is several parameters. How can you build your own staking pool? The one important parameter is the pledge. Actually, the pledge is as you promised how much you want to put your own as the pool operator, how much of the ADA you want put in your own pool. So it's not mandatory and not bounded. So you can put a lot of your ADA as the pledge, or you can put only limited amount of your ADA. And you can also see you don't want to put any, you just own the pool and you don't want to put any pledge here. And depends on different situations, the pool can have a different amount of delegators who delegate different amount of ADA to the pool. And because of the Cardano protocol set a fixed saturation threshold. So it means each pool has the same maximum of the receiving stake he can receive. You see, so we showed in this way because of all of them has the fixed maximum size here. Even some pool at the end, even some pool couldn't reach the max, and also some pool it has the more of the ADA to exist this threshold. But if this scenario happened, all of the reward can be diluted at the end, so you couldn't receive the same reward rate of your stake. And where is this reward come from in the Cardano system? Maybe you are a bit familiar. Is from the main part is from the ADA reserves. From there, you had a fixed amount of ADA to pay out as a reward at the end. But also in each epoch, all the transactions from the system will be also fund this reward pot. There is a fixed percentage from the reserve to influence in this reward pot, add the transaction fee. Then this amount of reward will be distributed in the system. Part of the ADA go to the treasury, part of go to the reward of the staking pool. And then this amount of ADA will be distributed among the different type of the staking pool here. And here are the parameters in the current protocol. On the top, you had some parameter related to material expansion. It means each period you had the 0.3% of ADA enter the system, and 20% goes to the treasury, the other part go to the reward. And from the staking pool point, each stake pool, the maximum threshold of each staking pool could be 0.2% among the total stake. And then, because we mentioned you can promise some pledge ADA, so it means here you had a different influence factor as your pledged ADA. From this logic, we do some further analysis that we try to trade the dynamic or the evolution of the reward changed. Because of there is the fixed supply from the reserve and the fixed percentage outflow from the reserve. So you can find that there is a slightly decline of the total reward because we use the amount of ADA from the reserves. And if you also know another part of input for the total reward is from the transaction fee. But if you go through the current situation of the system, maybe the current transaction fee is not enough to cover the reward in the future. And we do the modeling about to forecast what will be happen, follow the current situation, what will be happen of the reserved realizing rate. So we can find actually in around 5 years, 80% of the reserve will be released in the system. And maybe in 10 years, most of the ADA will be reserved. So maybe in the not too distant future, we can think about the system maybe could increase the transaction fee or use some top up from the treasury to keep the reward be kind of keep the reward be a kind of incentivized. And as we mentioned, the reward is from the reserved and the transaction fee. So you can find here is the reward rate based on each stake in each epoch. It's not the yearly reward rate, it's based on each epoch. And if you transform it to the yearly payout, it will be the most, at the previous period, the most value is around 50%. But now it's a bit like, it's still like the 3% of the APY. We can find, because of, if you increase the release rate from the reserved, it definitely will increase the reward rate here. But we should also think about, because it will be aggressive increase a lot of the monetary expenses from the reserved. So it's not a single decision. You just decide to increase the release rate will be increase the reward. Based on this risk, we further do the modeling. What will be happen if we change this kind of monetary parameter? What will be happen in the system? So of course, if you increase the fixed percentage from the reserve, it will be increase the release rate from the reserve and also increase the amount of ADA to flow in the treasury there. And sorry, I forgot to mention, this blue line is the current parameter in the system. So if, for example, if we increase the fixed percentage here, it will be increase the release rate. And if you see the green line there, it will be increase the amount of ADA in the treasury. And of course, it will influence how much of the reward will go to the reward pot there. But you can find when you increase the parameter, it has a different tendency of the influence in the final reward. So even you increase the percentage of the treasury rate, it still had some positive influence of the release rate. Because the reason is more of the ADA go to the treasury, so it's a bit less to the reward, then it will be less to return to the reserves. And here we had some kind of summary is when we accelerating the expansion monetary policy, it will very important to consider it like in an overview mind. It's not singly to think it will increase the reward or it will increase the rate to the treasury. We should give an overview think about the whole system. And go a bit deeper, we do the simulation of each parameter. Because we mentioned it's a very important parameter is the plus factor. So what will be happen if we change this parameter later? Because currently this parameter is equal to 0.3 at this line here. So what will be happen if we decrease or increase this parameter? The different staking pool, the reward of different staking pool will be slightly changed. And if you own the 1% of the stake, like this red line, or if you own more stake, like this blue line shows. So if you own a bit larger staking pool, means you own the more stake as the blue line shows here. So actually, when the system adjusts this plus factor parameter, you will get more influence from comparing with the bit small staking pool here. And when you increase this parameter, it kind of will be decrease your reward at the end. And if you remember the previous Gini index, you should know when the system increases this key parameter, the system kind of be more equality of the reward distribution. So with firstly simulation, what will be happening in the future if you keep increasing this saturation rate? So the more you increase it, it means you encourage the other delegators or the stakeholders to more diversely to cross the different staking pool. Because you decrease the max, it means more ADA should be redistributed among the more staking pools. It encourages the stake couldn't consensus in the single staking pool. So it will be benefit for the reward distribution in the system. It can result in more decentralization of the reward distribution. So we find some issue is maybe the reward sustainability is kind of the challenge because of the current transaction fee situation. But later we can think about to solve it by enlarging the increase of transaction or some ADA from the treasury. And also from the simulation result, we find the parameter adjustment And the decentralization measure is very important for if you want future optimize the protocol design. You should think, give an overall view of the parameter change, then the whole system from the reserve and the treasury and the total reward will have the different extent of the influence. And then use the, I transmit to the Claudio, give some future, some more conclusion and the future.
Yeah,
work.
Thank you very much, Sheng-Nan. I think that why do we want to do this at the end of the day? On the one side is because we want to, a part of our research is actually that we are doing a very general framework of how delegated proof-of-stake-based systems work. This is very important for us. We want to understand, you say that there is a family of protocols that are based on delegated proof-of-stakes. They may seem similar on the surface. You start scratching and they have a huge effect on how they are working. So we want to understand through this framework, better understand all these DPoS to better understand the role of protocol parameters. And Sheng-Nan did a fantastic work explaining some of the emergent properties when you are looking into the case of Cardano. And the second thing is because, remember, blockchains are not just a technology. Blockchains are about socioeconomic systems that are very complex. Human behavior is fundamental in order to understand how they are going to develop in the future. You can put some incentives, you can design it however you want. How it's going to translate into actual functioning of the system is a completely different matter. That's why we need to understand stakeholders' behavior. And by stakeholders here, I'm talking about the governance system, and the upcoming constitution of Cardano is a very appealing, very interesting, and very intriguing experiment there. But you also have staking pool operators. You also have the delegators that want to place in this. You have the market between the two, matching their relationship. And this is why we want to understand these behaviors in order to better understand which is the way in which they can optimize their strategies, both of the same, at the same time. But at the same level, you want to have a public, a global functioning of the system that's looking at how the all consensus protocol works and eventually thrives. And this is why we are creating this delegation game that we are developing as well as part of the extension of the framework. The last thing that I would like to say is that all this thing would not have been possible without the rest of the members of my team, to which I'm really thankful. We only have 2 here, but we are really thankful for all of this. Thank you very much, people.
Thank you so much, Claudio. Sheng-Nan Li. I can imagine you have questions. I mean, it's a lot of information, a lot of data to consume. See, Umar, you just raised your hand. Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been studying this incentive scheme of Cardano for a long time. One of the things that puzzled me, and I think it's safe to say that it hasn't worked. It was a great thing in theory. Is the pledge, and its importance in pushing the stake into the top, K pools. It hasn't shown its efficacy in reality, and I would like to know if there's a way to push the stake up to like 500 at this point, without jeopardizing too much in terms of rewards or rewards rate. My sense is that you have to play with K, you have to play with tau, you have to play with RO in order to basically reach that. Because if we just change the A0, the overall rewards for majority of pools is going to go down because you just change the slope of the reward scheme. But I would like to know, without changing the incentive scheme, how could we achieve the stake to move up based on solely on reward returns for delegators?
Yes, Sheng-Nan?
Okay, great. And firstly, we need to mention, we also agree the Cardano system give the more choice of the staking holders, because there you can change, as the pool operator, you can change the parameter, give to how to attract the staking pool holders or not. But as the delegator, you can also have more choice because you can select which pool you prefer in the system. And from the global thing, I think maybe we can further think to build some reputation system to not rank, but from there you can cite the different, record the different behavior of different staking pool. So give the whole list and supply a better option for the global stakeholders to select the different stake pool there.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to Sheng-Nan's answer is that I think that with respect to, I also agree with something we were discussing in the past, that actually the pledge, at the end of the day, in one of her plots, let me show it, in one of the plots, I think that this is more illustrative. The reason, do you remember what is the meaning of these figures? The crazy thing, remember this is the pledge. The thing is that you are seeing basically everything, and this is exactly why it was not serving to try to align incentives as a mechanism inside of the protocol. And that's why at the end of the day there has to be made a decision on how to elevate what it means exactly, that fraction of that, because now it is basically, it's not very relevant, let's say, at the level of the protocol.
Yeah, in my experience, it works on the bigger side. Like, let's say that the pool pledge is 30 million, then people actually see gain in their rewards, so they actually get.
But at the end of the day, it is exactly the same. It doesn't matter how you got that amount of money. If it is also by stakes, at the end of the day, it gives the same signal. So I think that the only important thing is the non-white area here, that is the total stake. So whether you obtain it by pledge or not, I was discussing with some of the SPOs, others may have a conflicting view. But if I understood right, I think that the most important signal is the non-white part, that is the non-staked part with respect to the total that you are expected to rise. And I think that that's why perhaps there should be something, you have to redesign a little bit that mechanism. Thank you for the question.
Really interested is how that translates to the behavior of the stake pools. So I'm curious, do you take into account other things? So for example, like price of ADA must have a huge effect on incentives, right? So I'm curious if you have any insights on how price affects that. And also, do you consider maybe some second or third order consequences of some of these parameters? So for example, the graph that you had about the K's relation to the Gini coefficient, do you take into account things like pool splitting there, where a fully saturated pool is incentivized to just split and then advertise, hey, just delegate to these two new pools, things like that. Can you offer any insights there? Yeah, like there, it's like you have APY, but
yeah, and there was
price also.
I prefer the previous plot.
Incentive.
Which one?
The one with the...
This one?
It was
Yes.
towards the end.
Great.
Yeah, this one, that one.
Yes, thanks for a good question, because here you give some more incentive. What's the price here? What's the influence of the price? But it's kind of internal research or the external, because if sometimes the price will be, the influence of the price, maybe some ADA will be flew out from the system. So current research is, you see this yellow line, the total stake is kind of stable, but the price will always be changed. But in the current system, the stake is stable around the staking process or the delegation process. So what our research is, based on the stable staking situation, what will be the game series between the different delegators and the staking pool operators here?
Mm-hmm. And I also have to complement, that's what we have been doing so far. Remember that we said we want to understand behavior. This is exactly what you said. And I think that the first step was, if I have to think methodologically on the approach, is first we have been doing data analysis. We want to categorize, to split the kinds of behaviors so that we can put it inside of an economic model. I think that that's where we are really, specifically the two of us, are very interested in having an open dialogue with the people from the SPOs and so on, because we want to understand also for you which are the relevant traits that may enter into that model. We have our own ideas, you may have others, and perhaps we do not think about this because we're not working all the day on that. And then to incorporate this, to later actually even have behavioral experiments in the long run as well. Not only continue doing the data analysis within this categorical framework, but also doing as well behavioral experiments exactly to understand, to have benchmarks as well that allow us to have a better understanding of what is going on. It's a very good question. Thank you. Yes.
A question regarding the different aspects that were explained today. So in my mind, how I view it is there's really two ways of looking at it. There's all the parameters and how they affect the staking economics and everything. And there's also the question of what happens when the treasure or where we deplete all the emissions. And I think that is very similar to proof of work, stake, all of those have the same problem. What happens when you're only basing your rewards on transaction fees? And in my mind, the way I do it is that all these parameters are just, so it's basically a race against time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get enough adoption for when you will deplete all your
Correct.
rewards. And Bitcoin
Correct.
has the same problem, and Cardano obviously has the same problem when you have mixed supply. And so all these parameters in my mind just let you play a little bit on the time scale.
Correct.
How much
Full.
you want to go, longer or shorter in terms of
Fully agree.
Of years. What would be interesting to me is modeling what really happens after you deplete, because this is fixed in time, so this is only relevant for 2 years. And after that, how do you play on that? If you increase the transaction fee, maybe you get less adoption. So I'm wondering if you've ever looked at it, or if you know if there's a sweet spot of transaction fees that would not decrease adoption, but would also make it sustainable.
Sheng-Nan will answer.
Yeah, currently we didn't do the simulation of what will be happen if you increase the transaction rate. Because from there, you should further think about the transaction users, not only the stake process in the system. So from there, if you increase the transaction fee, maybe the user will have more option about the different platforms there. But from the staking process, if you increase the transaction fee, it definitely will increase the total reward. But we are not kind of sure what will be happen of the amount of users there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you said two things. I think that we fully understand that there is all these time scales, that this is basically what is happening. And can I say something that is uncomfortable? But I said that I was going to say I'm biased here, okay? I will pledge to that slide before. I think that a huge problem that all the blockchain-based systems have, all of them, when thinking of the set of incentives, is that they were thinking fixed, released, scheduled in terms of monetary supply in the long run as a way of aligning behavior of the people. Okay, it happens everywhere. Happened on Bitcoin, mentioned it. Happened on Bitcoin. Happened on Ethereum with all the third generation ones, etc. And in general, in real world economies, you have a allocation of a new supply based on the demand that you have on money. And here it is not. You already have this thing created automatically, and also with this shrinking thing in the long run. And from that point of view, you see, my main concern with that is the following. I understand that blockchains were all conceived by very smart people. I have no doubt about it. Whatever smart you are still designing a platform that has, at that moment, 0 users, so you cannot foresee long-term usage, and much less how it's going to be used in 10 years from now. So already designing a profile while you still have 0 users is a very dangerous decision at the beginning. I think that what we should try to reflect ourselves is whether we do not want to relax this fixed environment, trying to find that hotspot in a more organic manner than just trying to stick to the schedule. Honestly speaking, that is my answer in general to all the ecosystem.
Yeah, it sounds like Ethereum probably thought about this.
Exactly, and then they started to create Ethereum, but they started to create this burning thing to try to make it more market allocation. But there are some things that can be done, perhaps, that are interesting to be exploring. Sorry, the last thing that I say is that setting up that parameter is actually part of what we want to do, because now at least we have a release schedule. I think that the POS framework we want to build is exactly trying to address those kind of questions. There was more a philosophical answer. Please, Denisio.
Yeah, we have time for 2 more questions. Just because, the lunch starts at 2 o'clock, and I just want to make sure that everyone gets a fair amount of time for their lunch. So please, if you have any last questions, feel free.
Now everybody wants to go to lunch. No.
Another one to build on that, actually. I kind of agree with what you said, that like this notion of tail emission, to have like some kind of rules-based emission, like to infinity, basically, might be a very powerful tool, though it's a very contentious topic in blockchain circles. I'm curious if you can comment on the differences of tail emission between proof of work and proof of stake, because in proof of work, if you have this tail emission, it is not really split evenly, or it's not nearly as well distributed among the actual coin holders.
Correct.
As in proof of stake. So in proof of stake, the reward that you get is kind of your risk-free rate. If you have some kind of tail emission that's, you call it inflation, which is very close or matches this risk-free rate, then you don't really end up losing money in real terms as a delegator. Whereas in proof of work, if you just hold a coin and use tail emission to incentivize the
Correct.
you do lose money in real
Exactly.
terms. So
Can
do you
I-
think this is more viable in a proof of stake?
Yes,
than
absolutely.
tail emission?
Yes, absolutely. And not only that, there is a problem. Proof of work is problematic in another dimension as well. It's the fact that it is a competition-based scheme for consensus, which is fantastic, okay? However, the problem that it raises, and she has a paper on this in her PhD, is that actually the consensus, when you do not have any more tail emission of supply, the consensus is not anymore guaranteed in proof of work. In proof of stake, yes, because the consensus, the way in which you align everybody into the same chain, is given by the protocol. In proof of work, because this is probabilistic, depending on many other factors, like for example the rate at which new transactions are issued into the system, the consensus may become even unstable, and you just have infinite set, well, not infinite, but most likely a set of forks and nobody agrees on a final state. So I think that from that point of view, I think that all the POS families of blockchains are far more stable and also more economically viable, taking into account still that Cardano has made a lot of effort to try to make it as distributed as possible, the reward mechanism. In any case, you always have a process by which you are always increasing the concentration in those players that are larger. Okay, the larger you are, the richer. The rich gets richer is something that just happens in economy. It's not only in Cardano; it's our life. So, okay, and that's basically what we have to figure out. That's why all this plot in which she was showing the total rewards, consecutive rewards. You also see that there is a kind of a stabilization in the market of how much stakes you need to do to have a continuous operation in terms of rewards as well. And you see that here there is accumulation and concentration.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to have you guys.
Thank you very much.
Before we end, I just wanted to say just a few things. The research is fully, it's not biased, it's independent. Right? And of course, it's a partnership with the Cardano Foundation, but having such a partner as a university of Zurich research, it just shows the value, of the information that is provided to you as a community, and it shows the outcome and effects of, let's say, whatever changes that is made to the
absolutely. The only thing I want to add on that is that we're really thankful for this collaboration, also because we have a lot of freedom to try to see which we are just trying to figure out what is best for the development of the ecosystem, which is nice.
And lastly, I know that you guys, the original design was really to work also with stateful operators.
Correct.
And that's something that you're actually working on, I think, this summit, to hook up with some of the stateful operators, but that more information on that is
yeah, thank you very much. Actually, one thing that we want to do is, for us, this next step in our research is fundamental. So we really want to, as I said before, we really want to understand better the thinking of the staking pool operators, the way in which you think in order to make decisions, not because actually we want to support the growth of the ecosystem. At the end of the day, having a working matching between staking pool operators, delegators, and also the ecosystem as a whole is something important for everybody. And in a way, as part of our research, we want to, as I said before, understand how agents behave. And that's why having more continuous cycles of interaction with the SPOs could be fantastic because it will allow us to advance our research, but also may give you very useful hints, those of you that are SPOs, hints on how to adapt yourself to changing environments as well. That's what we want to provide. We want to do research because it is fun to do research, but at the end of the day, we also want to give back knowledge to the community because this is what we are trying to do, and that's why our collaboration with you is important. So if you are interested in discussing with us, we'll be really happy to do so.